Welcome to the Digital Showcase with GAINSystems. GAINS has been an innovator in supply chain planning, first starting with inventory optimization. I first met GAINS early in the last 2 decades. Today I'm interviewing Bill Benton, and Bill is the CEO and chairman of the board of GAINS, and we're going to talk about the future of supply chain and his view on Supply Chain 2030. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laura. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, tell the group a little bit about yourself.
I joined GAINS in the late 90s. My background's in decision science and econometrics. So we've been passionate/nerdy about predictive decision science and optimization for many years. My background came up through the professional services and product management and design areas, and I became CEO here about 8 years ago. We've pivoted towards a fully cloud strategy around 2016. And since then, we've been trying to expand into value-added spaces around our core supply chain planning and optimization capabilities and GAINS since then. So in terms of my additional background, as I've been working with the growing team here, we also brought on some growth equity as well to help us with acquisitions around adjacent products like those in network flow and other design tools. You know, I'm really happy to be here again, and looking forward to the conference as well.
Bill, I think you've been to 8 of the 8 conferences. I don't think you've missed one.
I find them some of the most value-added and engaging events that I go to. I only go to about 3 events per year, and this is one that I found both the sort of the substance of the dialogue and the nature of your peers that join as well. I think also, Laura, your approach really engenders openness. So, you know, we're there with some competitors. Some of our customers are there with their competitors, but everybody seems to leave that at the door and shares their problems and approaches and best practices in a really meaningful way. So.
Well, we look forward to seeing you again. You know, it's been so long since I've been to a conference. I'm getting excited about it. But Bill, how do you see Supply Chain 2030? You know, think back to the last decade. We saw the gaps between operations and finance grow. We saw the CIO starting to report the CFO. We saw that resilience in industries started to really be disconnected about 2014, even before the pandemic. We experienced our biggest pandemic. How do you see 2030?
It's funny, when I first heard that question, about half tongue in cheek, I wanted to ask if you were referring to 8:30 p.m. military time.
All right.
So many of our customers are so focused on execution right now due to all the scarcity and backlog management issues and supply variability, et cetera. So that's why I said half tongue in cheek, because as an organization that's been sort of had its genesis in planning, we've spent a lot of our time and effort moving in 2 directions. And one direction is towards optimized execution. And we believe that those 2 things need to be married and unified. So part of my answer is sort of an extension of that, which is, I think there's going to be 3 primary themes, and it's hard to limit it to 3, but I think 3 primary that are going to drive our journey over the next 9 years. First, we believe, as I mentioned, there's going to be unification of design through execution. So currently you might think of supply chain design as a biannual project rather than a continuous process. We believe it's going to become much more of the latter. So as you think of unifying the entire supply chain process set, starting with design, through budget, to S&OP, to tactical planning, to execution, we think that needs to be in one single canonical model so that terms are shared, dates have the same meanings, et cetera. And also move from periodic or project-based or even cadence-based to event-driven and continuous. So we think that that's where one of the main transformations we'll see over the next several years I don't know that vision, at least pieces of it, are not novel, but we think it will become real. And then, one of the things that we think is that you'll need to be able to do that at speed in a democratized fashion. So let me delve a little bit into that. Currently, some of the large projects are just that, right? They're multi-year, thousands of person hour. Typically, by the time they're finished, some of the people that started are no longer engaged. We don't think that's a viable model, except maybe for the top 1% of industry. And maybe even there, it's not optimal. So the unification of sort of design through execution and doing that at speed in a democratized fashion. The second element we see is ubiquitous data, whether that's used for sensing or execution collaboration, but that data, which is still surprisingly difficult to acquire, particularly in the mid-market and upper mid-market, will become ubiquitous, and algorithmic engines that can use that for demand sensing, as we all know about, but also supply sensing will become more automated and more rapid. And at some point, we're going to pass the threshold where human intervention is a net add, right? Because the latency involved in exception planning, et cetera, might outweigh any benefits of that review. So we think that ubiquitous sensing data at speed is going to be sort of the killer app that drives demand planning and supply sensing to a nearly fully automated approach. And then the third element we see, and this was accelerated by the pandemic, is network liquidity. So this idea that rather than a general steady state with annual or biannual or triennial contracts between suppliers and their customers, and those customers and their customers, for example, that things will move into much greater form of liquidity. Now, this won't be true of highly specialized products, but even say moderately specialized, certainly through the commodity, where we see that the ability to redesign rapidly because your suppliers or customers are changing, and how does that drive budget, margin, S&OP, KPIs, planning, and execution. So we see these three interdependent factors all continuing to burgeon throughout the next several years. And because of that view of Supply Chain 2030, we're, as GAINSystems, focusing our efforts through decision science and expanding both in the strategy and execution.
Well, what conversations are you looking forward to having with people while you're there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say several, starting with fairly mundane things like how are your teams adapting to this amount of volatility? And how do you prevent them, say, from retrenching or getting burned out? So I think from an HR perspective, it'll be interesting to understand, like, where are we and what are some breaking points? Because, as a sort of an algorithmic planning provider, how you guide people through different phases of maturity is really, really important. And the difference between bending and breaking can be significant. So I'd like to understand that. How people are responding to supplier liquidity, changing suppliers, managing radical changes in supply lead times, supply lead time variability. And then also sort of as we move past the backlog, right? What are people doing in execution? Improvement's going to be another question. And then lastly, as you move through that, what are they putting in place as we look forward and not just backwards at our backlog here? So trying to understand where, leaders in the industry are focused as well, and sort of synchronize our strategic view with those in the marketplace, and frankly, some of the ideas you're gonna provide seed and challenge us with, Laura.
Well, we look forward to having you there. So, Bill, pack your bags. We're off to Franklin, Tennessee. This will be on the 7th to the 9th, where we're going to design an event that is for extreme networking so that everyone can join the guiding coalition for Supply Chain 2030. Bill, until then.
All right, Laura, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Bye now.
My name is Lora, cecere, and I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and I want to give you a personal invitation to join this year's Supply Chain Insights Global Summit. Now in its 8th year of doing this conference, we designed this for a unique experience for supply chain leaders to learn from technology leaders to think differently and drive new outcomes. We're hoping that you can make it on September 7th through the 9th in Franklin, Tennessee. In the conference, we handpick all of the speakers and we design the conference for a unique networking experience so that you leave to build a guiding coalition for change. We hope to see you there.